The Empress's voice filled the royal chamber, cold and dispassionate. Let the hunt begin. On 12 different screens orbiting her gilded throne, the same image appeared, a woman running through dense forest, her face obscured by a hood, her movements betraying both fear and determination. This wasn't a simulation. On the remote moon of Erebus, halfway across the galaxy, the woman was fighting for her life. Admiral Voss inclined his head, the neural implants at his temples pulsing with eager blue light. As you command, Your Radiance. The betting pools are already reaching record levels. The nobles are particularly excited about this one. They should be, the Empress replied, her genetically perfected features revealing nothing. Subject 7734 has already survived longer than any before her. 3 days. Most don't make it past the first sunset. The tradition was as old as the Empire itself, 10,000 years of hunting selected individuals across specially designed planetoids. It had begun as military training, evolved into political punishment, and finally transformed into the ultimate entertainment for the Empire's elite. They called it the culling. Only the most dangerous or notorious criminals were selected, their crimes broadcast across the neural networks that bound the Empire together. This particular subject had been captured attempting to hack the Imperial mainframe, a capital offense. But rather than immediate execution, she'd been chosen for the culling. Something about her had intrigued the Empress. On Erebus, the woman paused at a stream, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Kneeling, she cupped water in dirt-stained hands, drinking greedily. The hood fell back, revealing a face both ordinary and extraordinary, unremarkable features transformed by fierce intelligence in her eyes. This was Elara Sen, age 34, former data scientist from a forgotten outer colony world. She's good, observed General Talon, head of Imperial Special Forces, his expression a mixture of professional admiration and personal disdain. Watch how she moves. Those aren't civilian patterns. Agreed, said Admiral Voss. Her file says she's never had military training, but she's moving like someone who knows exactly what they're doing in hostile territory. The Empress's silver eyes narrowed slightly. Interesting. Release the hounds. On Erebus, a distant howl cut through the forest silence. Elara's head snapped up, her body instantly alert. The genetically engineered hounds, wolf-like creatures with enhanced intelligence and sadistic hunting patterns, were the Empire's favorite hunters. Few survived an encounter. Elara didn't run in panic. Instead, she quickly gathered stones from the streambed, wrapping them in a torn piece of her jumpsuit. Then she climbed a nearby tree with practiced efficiency, disappearing into the thick foliage just as the first hound burst into the clearing. The creature was magnificent, twice the size of ancient earth wolves, with iridescent black fur and eyes that glowed blood red. It circled the clearing, sniffing the air, while 2 more joined it. They tracked her scent to the stream, then lost it at the royal chamber. The nobles watching through their neural implants began murmuring in surprise. Subjects never outsmarted the hounds. Never. She's buying time, General Talon noted. But for what? As if in answer, Elara dropped from the tree directly onto the lead hound, her makeshift stone weapon smashing into its skull with a sickening crack. Before the other creatures could react, she rolled away, sprinting through the undergrowth with a speed that shocked even the hardened military observers. Impossible, Voss whispered. Those beasts have enhanced reflexes. No ordinary human could. She's no ordinary human, the Empress interrupted, leaning forward. For the first time in centuries, something had genuinely surprised her. Who is she? Really? Across the galaxy, billions watched through their neural feeds as Elara Sen did the impossible, evading Imperial hounds, setting traps for drone hunters, surviving in an environment designed to kill. The betting pools swelled to unprecedented levels. Typically, the Empire's citizens cheered for the hunters, reveling in the gruesome deaths of criminals. But something strange was happening. People were beginning to root for the prey. In the shadows beyond the royal chamber, a hooded figure watched silently. Unlike the nobles with their garish displays of wealth, this observer wore the simple gray uniform of Imperial intelligence. Director Soren Vale had personally flagged Elara's file months ago, before her capture. Now he watched the Empress's growing interest with calculated patience. 3 more days passed. Elara continued to evade capture, growing stronger rather than weaker, turning the hunters' weapons against them. She'd killed 5 hounds and disabled 3 hunter drones. The betting odds shifted. The nobles grew restless. Enough games, the Empress finally declared. Send in the Praetorians. Admiral Voss paled. Your Radiance, the Praetorians have never been used in a culling. They're your personal guard, not do it. On Erebus, a black shuttle pierced the atmosphere, landing in a smoldering clearing. Ramps descended, and 12 figures emerged. The Praetorians, the deadliest soldiers in the known galaxy. Cybernetically enhanced, psychologically conditioned for absolute loyalty, they were living weapons with no concept of mercy. Elara watched from her hiding place atop a ridge, her face set in grim determination. She touched something at her wrist, a simple leather band that seemed out of place against the high-tech backdrop of the hunt. Then she did something no one expected. She stepped into the open. I am Elara Sen, her voice rang out, carried by the forest winds. And I surrender. In the royal chamber, silence fell, the Empress's perfect features twisted into something resembling confusion. What is she doing? The Praetorians surrounded Elara, weapons trained on her heart. She stood calmly, hands raised, a strange half-smile on her exhausted face. The hunt ends, she said clearly, knowing the cameras would pick up every word, but the war begins. Then she pressed her wristband, and everything changed. The explosion wasn't physical, it was digital. Across the Empire, neural networks flickered. Screens distorted. The carefully controlled feed from Erebus fragmented, then stabilized, but something was different. The royal seal that always occupied the corner of official broadcasts had changed. Where once the stylized phoenix of House Valkyr had burned eternal, now a simple symbol pulsed, a circle with a diagonal line through it, the mark of the Nulls, the resistance movement that had been fighting the Empire from the shadows for centuries. In the royal chamber, chaos erupted. Security personnel swarmed around the Empress, shields activating. Admiral Voss barked orders into his neural link. General Talon drew his ceremonial blade, as if digital ghosts could be fought with steel. Only the Empress remained calm, her silver eyes fixed on the screens where Elara Sen stood surrounded by Praetorians. Clever, she whispered. Very clever. On Erebus, the Praetorians should have executed Elara immediately upon her surrender. That was protocol. Instead, they stood frozen, their neural implants glitching as new code rewrote their programming. When they moved again, it was to form a protective circle around her, weapons now pointed outward. Elara lowered her hands. Thank you for your cooperation, soldiers. Now, shall we address the Empire? The lead Praetorian, his face a mask of conflicting emotions as his core programming battled the intrusive code, managed a jerky nod. Elara looked directly into the nearest camera drone. People of the Galactic Empire, you've been watching me for a week, betting on my death. Now I ask you to listen. My name is not Elara Senator. That identity was created to gain access to your networks. I am Commander Aria Dune of the Nulls. In the royal chamber, Director Soren Vale stepped forward from the shadows, his expression unreadable. Your Radiance, I believe we have a significant security breach. The Empress didn't look at him. Explain, Director. The Nulls are more than terrorists. They're an advanced splinter faction created after the purge of New Terra. We've always assumed they were led by surviving military personnel, but we've never confirmed their command structure. On screen, Aria continued, for 300 years, your Empress has told you that we are terrorists, anarchists, seeking to destroy the peace she has built. This is a lie. We are the last free humans, fighting against an empire built on deception. She held up her wrist, displaying the simple leather band. This isn't just a detonator. It's a quantum key, one capable of accessing the Imperial mainframe. Your security experts will be scrambling right now, trying to understand how I bypassed your firewalls. They won't succeed, because the vulnerability isn't in your code. It's in your history. In command centers across the galaxy, Imperial cybersecurity teams worked frantically, trying to cut the broadcast. Nothing worked. Whatever Aria had unleashed was using the Empire's own networks against it, spreading from system to system like a digital wildfire. I allowed myself to be captured, Aria explained, her voice growing stronger. I needed direct neural link access to the Imperial mainframe, something only possible from inside your most secure facilities. The culling provided the perfect opportunity. Your Empress's fascination with unusual prey made the rest easy. The Empress rose from her throne, silver eyes blazing. Find her. Kill her. Now. Admiral Voss was already issuing commands, dispatching ships to Erebus. But everyone in the royal chamber knew they would be too late. On screen, Aria's face grew solemn. For generations, you believed the enhanced humans were exterminated after they rebelled against natural humans. Your history tells you they were dangerous aberrations, humans genetically modified for specific traits who grew too powerful, too independent. Your Empress claims to be your protector against such threats. Aria's eyes seemed to look directly at the Empress through the screen. But what if I told you the opposite is true? What if the enhanced were not the oppressors, but the oppressed? What if your entire society is built on the greatest lie ever told? She raised her hand, and the quantum key glowed blue. Let me show you. Across the Empire, on trillions of neural implants and view screens, the same image appeared, ancient footage, its authenticity verified by embedded quantum signatures impossible to forge. It showed a laboratory where children with silver eyes were being subjected to horrific experiments. The timestamp, over 10,000 years ago, during the founding of the Empire. Project Phoenix, Aria narrated. The Imperial dynasty's darkest secret. Not the elimination of enhanced humans, but their creation and subjugation. The Valkyr line isn't natural. Your Empress isn't human, at least, not entirely. She's the culmination of 10 millennia of genetic engineering, each Empress more perfect than the last. In the royal chamber, the Empress's composure finally cracked. Shut it down, she screamed. Shut it down. But the broadcast continued, showing more footage, the systematic enslavement of enhanced humans, the genetic modifications forced upon generations of children, the creation of a ruling class built on engineered supremacy. Your society's entire structure is based on carefully controlled genetic modification, Aria continued. The noble houses, the military castes, even the servant classes, all designed and maintained through selective breeding and neural conditioning. You aren't protecting humanity from dangerous enhanced beings. You are those beings, carefully controlled by the ultimate enhanced human, your Empress. The footage changed again, showing the rebellion 3 centuries earlier that had been crushed ruthlessly, the event known as the Purge of New Terra. It hadn't been enhanced humans rebelling, it had been naturally born humans discovering the truth and fighting for freedom. The Nulls aren't terrorists, Aria concluded. We're the descendants of those who escaped the Purge, the last naturally born humans fighting to free both ourselves and you. Your neural implants aren't just communication devices. They're control mechanisms, limiting your thoughts, your emotions, your very humanity. She smiled sadly. But now you know. And knowing is the first step toward freedom. In the royal chamber, chaos reigned. Naval officers were receiving reports of unrest on core worlds. Military commanders reported units refusing orders. The carefully constructed hierarchy of the Empire was beginning to fracture. Director Soren Vale watched it all with faint amusement. Fascinating how quickly 10,000 years of control can unravel, isn't it, Your Radiance? The Empress turned to him, recognition dawning in her silver eyes. You knew. Of course, he replied calmly. Why do you think I ensured Aria Dune was selected for the culling? We needed her on a stage you couldn't ignore. Admiral Voss drew his weapon, but Vale merely smiled. Throughout the chamber, half the security personnel suddenly turned their weapons on the noble houses and military commanders. You're one of them, the Empress whispered. I've been many things during my centuries of service to the Empire, Vale replied. But yes, for the past 50 years, I've been working with the Nulls. Even empires fall, Your Radiance. Especially those built on lies. On screen, Aria and her Praetorian guards were boarding an Imperial shuttle, preparing to leave Erebus behind. The revolution had begun, but its true architect stood in the royal chamber, watching 10 millennia of careful planning come to fruition. The Empress, product of countless generations of genetic perfection, finally showed an emotion her designers had never intended. Fear. The Empress's private sanctuary deep within the Imperial palace had remained unchanged for 10,000 years. Each successive Empress, a genetic copy of her predecessor with slight improvements, had maintained the traditions established by the founder. Now, as civil unrest spread across 1,000 worlds, Empress Valkyr Xi paced the ancient stone floor, her perfect features twisted with rage. "You've doomed us all," she hissed at Director Vale, who sat calmly in a chair meant for supplicants, not traitors. "Do you have any idea what you've unleashed? The genetic castes will turn on each other. Billions will die in the chaos." "Perhaps," Vale acknowledged. "Or perhaps humanity will finally have a chance to evolve naturally again. Your ancestors stopped our evolution, your radiance. They froze humanity in amber, controlled every aspect of our development for their own power." Beyond the sanctuary walls, the palace shook as protesters clashed with loyalist troops. The Empress's inner circle had shrunk dramatically in the hours since Aria's broadcast. Many had fled, others had been revealed as long-term Null sympathizers. Only Admiral Voss remained staunchly loyal, coordinating the defense of the palace with dwindling resources. "Why?" the Empress demanded. "You've served the throne for centuries. You've had every privilege, every honor." Vale's expression remained placid. "I served humanity, not the throne. There's a difference you've never understood." A holographic display activated, showing Aria Dune's shuttle approaching the Imperial capital. Despite orders to destroy it on sight, the defense grid had allowed it passage. More evidence of infiltration at the highest levels. "You think she's coming to liberate you?" the Empress laughed bitterly. "To welcome you as a hero of the revolution? You're delusional, Director. The Nulls hate everyone associated with the Empire. They'll execute you alongside me." "Possibly," Vale conceded. "I've always considered my own survival secondary to the mission." The Empress stopped pacing, her silver eyes narrowing with sudden understanding. "The mission, it was never about freedom, was it? This is about the precursor technology." For the first time, Vale looked surprised. "You know about that? I'm the 23rd Empress of my line, Director. Did you really think none of us discovered the truth?" She approached a seemingly blank wall, placing her palm against it. Ancient mechanisms whirred, and a hidden door slid open. "The founder didn't create our line simply for power. She created us to guard against something far worse than genetic manipulation." Inside the hidden chamber, a single object floated in a containment field, a metallic sphere covered in swirling patterns that seemed to move of their own accord. It pulsed with an inner light that didn't belong to any known spectrum. "The seed," the Empress said softly. "The last remnant of the precursors, the species that came before humanity. The technology that gave birth to our empire and the reason it must continue." Vale rose slowly, his eyes fixed on the sphere. "All these centuries I suspected something like this existed, but to actually see it, the founder discovered it on a dead world at the edge of what would become our empire. It gave her the knowledge to create our genetic program, to build the neural networks, to expand humanity across the stars. But it also showed her what would happen if the technology fell into unprepared hands." Outside, the palace defenses were failing. The revolution that had begun with one woman's broadcast was now a tidal wave crashing against the foundations of power. "The seed influences minds, Director. Subtly at first, then completely. The founder created our line with specific genetic markers to resist its influence. The neural implants you so despise? They protect ordinary humans from its call. Without them, without us, humanity becomes something else." Vale approached the sphere cautiously. "You expect me to believe the Empire, with all its cruelty and oppression, has been protecting humanity? That's convenient." "I expect nothing from traitors," the Empress replied coldly. "But consider this, why has the revolution spread so quickly? Why are normally loyal citizens suddenly turning violent, destructive? The moment Aria Dune activated her quantum key, she didn't just access our networks. She created a pathway for the seed to begin its work. A new alert appeared on the holographic display. Aria's shuttle had landed in the palace's main hangar. Imperial forces had stepped aside, allowing her entry. The end was approaching. You still don't understand what you're dealing with, the Empress continued. The Nulls believe they're fighting for freedom, but they've been manipulated from the start. Not by us, by this. She gestured to the sphere. It wants to be found. It wants to be used. And in doing so, it will transform humanity into extensions of itself. Vale's confident expression faltered. You're lying. This is just another Imperial deception. Am I? The Empress's voice grew softer. Look into your own mind, Director. In the centuries you've served the throne, how many of your brilliant ideas came after nights of unusual dreams? How many strategic insights appeared fully formed in your thoughts? The seed has been influencing you too, guiding you toward this moment. Before Vale could respond, the sanctuary doors burst open. Aria Dune entered, flanked by reprogrammed Praetorians and resistance fighters. Her eyes widened at the sight of the seed. Director, she acknowledged Vale with a nod. I see you found it. You knew? Vale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Of course. Aria approached the containment field, her expression reverent. The Nulls have always known about the precursor artifact. We've spent centuries looking for it. The Empire didn't protect humanity from it, they hoarded its power for themselves. The Empress laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. And there it is. The final proof. She turned to Vale. She doesn't want to destroy it. She wants to use it exactly as the seed intended. Aria signaled the Praetorians. Arrest the Empress. Prepare her for public trial. As the enhanced soldiers moved forward, Vale suddenly stepped between them and the Empress. Wait. I think we need to reconsider our approach. Aria's eyes narrowed. Director, step aside. We've won. The Empire is falling. This is what we've worked toward for centuries. Is it? Vale gestured toward the seed. What exactly do you plan to do with this? Unlock its full potential, Aria replied without hesitation. Free humanity from Imperial constraints. The precursors were enlightened beings who left this gift for us to find when we were ready. Now we are. The Empress met Vale's troubled gaze. Do you understand now, Director? This was never about freedom. The seed doesn't liberate, it converts. Outside the palace, across the capital planet, riots had given way to something more disturbing. People with glazed expressions walked purposefully through the streets, converging on centers of power. Many had removed their neural implants, leaving bloody wounds where the technology had been torn away. They moved with unnatural coordination, as if guided by an unseen hand. On the holographic display, similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. It's already happening, the Empress said quietly. The seed is calling its children home. Vale looked from the Empress to Aria, his mind racing. In that moment, he realized the terrible truth. He'd been a pawn in a game much older and more dangerous than the struggle between Empire and Rebellion. The seed had manipulated both sides, engineering its own discovery. Aria, he said carefully, we need to destroy the artifact. The Empress is right, it's changing people. Aria's expression hardened. I didn't expect this betrayal from you, Director. The changes are simply humanity shedding Imperial control. We're evolving, as we were always meant to. That's not evolution, the Empress countered. It's assimilation. For 10,000 years, the Imperial line had maintained its genetic purity to resist the seed's influence. The neural implants, the rigid caste system, the controlled development of technology, all designed not for power, but for protection. The Empire's cruelty had been a terrible price paid for humanity's continued independence, and now, in the name of freedom, that protection was being dismantled. Vale made his decision. With surprising speed for his apparent age, he lunged toward the containment field controls. Aria shouted for the Praetorians to stop him, but the Empress moved faster, placing herself between them and Vale. The Empire dies today, she declared. But humanity survives. She pressed her palm against a hidden scanner, and the sanctuary began to seal itself. Energy barriers snapped into place, cutting off the hidden chamber from the rest of the room. Vale found himself trapped inside with the seed, while the Empress remained outside with Aria and the Praetorians. "What are you doing?" Vale demanded through the barrier. "What my line was created to do," the Empress replied calmly. "The sanctuary is now in lockdown. The seed cannot influence anything beyond these walls. And in exactly 5 minutes, the containment field will collapse, exposing you directly to the artifact." Vale paled. "You're sacrificing me. I'm giving you a choice, Director. The chamber contains a quantum dampener capable of destroying the seed permanently. Activate it, and both you and the artifact will be reduced to your component atoms. Or do nothing, and allow yourself to become the seed's most perfect vessel yet. Your centuries of Imperial conditioning make you an ideal host." Aria threw herself against the energy barrier, her face contorted with rage. "No. You can't destroy it. It's humanity's birthright." But the words no longer sounded like her own. The Empress looked at her sadly. "You hear it too, don't you? The whispers. The promises. That's not freedom calling to you, Commander Dune. That's subjugation." Inside the chamber, Vale stared at the pulsing sphere. Its swirling patterns seemed to form faces, now familiar faces from his long life, beckoning to him. It promised knowledge, power, immortality. All he had to do was reach out and touch it. The containment field around the seed began to flicker. "Make your choice, Director," the Empress called. "But know this, I may be the product of 10,000 years of genetic engineering, but I've chosen humanity's freedom over my own survival. Can you say the same?" Beyond the palace walls, the coordinated masses of converted citizens had breached the outer defenses. On screens throughout the sanctuary, worlds across the galaxy showed the same disturbing pattern, people moving as one, their individuality subsumed by the seed's growing influence. The prophecy the founder had foreseen was unfolding. Humanity would continue, but not as independent beings. They would become extensions of the precursor technology, parts of a vast network with the seed at its center. Unless Vale acted, the containment field collapsed completely. The seed hung in the air before him, more beautiful and terrible than anything he had ever seen. Its light pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "Join us," it seemed to say without words. "Complete the work you began centuries ago." Vale looked past it to where the Empress stood watching him, her silver eyes, the product of the most extensive genetic engineering in human history, filled with a very human fear. He understood at last. The Empire had never been the true enemy. It had been a shield, flawed and brutal, but a shield nonetheless. "I'm sorry," he said, though whether to the Empress or to Aria, he wasn't sure. Then Director Soren Vale, who had served the throne faithfully for centuries before betraying it, reached for the quantum dampener. 3 months after what historians would later call the Seed Crisis, Aria Dune stood at the observation deck of a small spacecraft orbiting New Terra. The planet below, once the site of the Empire's greatest atrocity, was now the center of humanity's fragile new beginning. "The resettlement is proceeding better than expected," said the man who joined her at the viewport. Former Admiral Voss had abandoned his Imperial uniform for the simple clothes of the Interim Council. 20,000 more colonists arrived yesterday. Most are recovering well from implant removal. Aria nodded. The neural implants that had once controlled the Empire's citizens were now understood for what they truly were, both chains and shields. Removing them left people vulnerable to the lingering echoes of the seed's influence, but it was a necessary risk for true freedom. "And the Empress?" she asked. "Adjusting to her new reality," Voss replied. "Prison doesn't suit her, but she's cooperating with the scientists studying her genetic makeup. The resistance she showed to the seed's influence could help us develop protections for others." Aria turned from the viewport, absently touching the scar where her own implant had once been. "I still don't understand why she saved us. She could have let the seed take over, maintained control through it. Perhaps after 23 generations, the Imperial line finally discovered its humanity," Voss suggested. "Or perhaps she simply chose the devil she knew over the one she didn't." The truth of the Empire's purpose remained controversial. Billions still viewed the Imperial family as monsters who had enslaved humanity for millennia. Others now saw them as flawed protectors, making terrible choices to guard against a worse fate. The reality, as with most of history, likely lay somewhere in between. What couldn't be denied was that Director Vale's sacrifice had saved humanity from conversion. The quantum dampener had destroyed both the seed and the sanctuary containing it, severing the precursor artifact's connection to the millions it had already begun to influence. Across the galaxy, affected individuals had collapsed simultaneously, later awakening with no memory of their actions but plagued by nightmares of a shared consciousness. The Empire had fallen nonetheless. Without the neural networks and strict control mechanisms, its carefully structured society had collapsed within weeks. Now, 3 months later, humanity was rebuilding messily, chaotically, but freely. "We recovered more files from Vale's private archive," Voss said, breaking the contemplative silence. "Records dating back to the Founder's time, describing how the seed was originally discovered." Aria's interest sharpened. "And it appears we weren't the first civilization to encounter precursor technology. The Founder found evidence of at least 7 previous species that discovered seeds on different worlds. None of those species exist anymore." The implication hung heavy in the recycled air of the observation deck. "So the Empire really was protecting us," Aria murmured. "All that cruelty, all that control, was the price they believed necessary for survival," Voss finished. "But was it? That's the question we now face. Can humanity resist such influences without becoming monsters ourselves?" Below them, New Terra gleamed blue and green in the light of its sun, a world once soaked in the blood of rebels, now a symbol of rebirth. The first colony established without genetic castes or neural controls in 10 millennia. An experiment in true human freedom. "Vale knew," Aria said suddenly. "At the end, he understood what the seed was doing to me, to all of us. I hated him for his betrayal," but now she shook her head. "Now I wonder if I would have had the strength to make the same choice." "We'll never know," Voss replied. "But we honor his sacrifice by building something worthy of it." A communication alert chimed softly. New data from the Deep Space Monitoring Network, the system humanity had hastily constructed after realizing the true nature of the threat they faced. The readings showed no signs of additional precursor technology within sensor range, but both knew that meant little. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's understanding of what they were looking for remained limited. "The Council meets in an hour," Voss said. "They'll want your final decision on the proposal." The proposal was controversial: to maintain a modified version of the Imperial genetic program, creating a specialized lineage designed to detect and resist precursor influence. Some called it a return to Imperial thinking, others saw it as a necessary precaution. The debate had raged for weeks. "Tell them I'll be there," Aria said. As Voss left, she turned back to the viewport, her reflection ghostly against the backdrop of stars. She was no longer the woman who had allowed herself to be captured for the culling, determined to bring down an empire she believed existed solely for oppression. Now she understood the terrible burden of knowledge that freedom came with responsibilities as heavy as any imperial decree. Somewhere in the vast darkness beyond New Terra, other seeds might wait, promising power while bringing subjugation. The Empire had chosen one path to guard against them, now humanity would have to find another, or risk everything they had won. Aria pressed her palm against the cool glass, as if reaching for the countless worlds below and beyond. "We will be better," she whispered to the stars. "We have to be." In the endless cycle of human history, of empires rising and falling, of knowledge gained and lost, perhaps this was the true evolution, not genetic perfection or technological dominance, but the wisdom to learn from the past without being enslaved by it. The hunt had ended. The truth had been revealed. Now, the real work of rebuilding humanity could begin. On New Terra, the first generation born without neural implants or genetic designation was already taking its first steps. Children who would grow up hearing the story of how an empire hunted a woman for sport until they learned who she really was, and in doing so, discovered who they might become.